Hey guys, Freddie Wills here from FreddieWills.com, back for another podcast this week. We're calling it week 5, and everyone's calling week 6 for college football. I think it's just easier because the NFL's in week 5, and week 1 for college football is like limited games. So I'm just going to call it week 5 for moving forward. Yes, I know that they played those college games the week before, but to make it easy on everybody, I'm calling this week 5. Let's recap where we are on the season and what we did this past week. Again, as you guys know, I always like to be transparent with my records. So let's start there. On the season, we're at plus 11.84% return on investment. This past week was a big week thanks to the NFL, plus 8.68%. In college football, unfortunately, another losing week, minus 1.2%. This past week after a 3-3 week, which easily could have been 4-2, which we'll get to in a short while here. NFL has been saving my ass here. There's no way around it. The past 3 weeks, we're up 24.4% on NFL picks. We've been really killing it in the NFL for a while now. So again, I have some packages up there. College is reduced, NFL is reduced, but my NFL and college package, which averages a yearly return on investment, combining the two, of 27%. That's on average. And I've profited 8 out of my 11 years. Is reduced now. You can get it for $399 guaranteed, or next season is free. So make sure you check that out. I also have this week's package up, $75 for this week's picks. You usually get 8 or more picks. Last week we had I think 11, and so looking for more of the same. So make sure you check that out at FreddieWills.com. And if you're not into buying picks, which I totally get and can understand, you can subscribe to my premium pick newsletter. It's 2-1-1 on the season. And this past week we gave out West Virginia on the money line as a dog who pulled the outright upset. So that was a nice winner. And we are on a 33-22 all sports pick run the last 55. And just under 55% picks over my last 101 NFL picks in October. So make sure you check all of that out. That's dating back to 2014. And, that's just in the month of October. September is typically always one of my better months. But since 2014, I've been doing really good in the NFL. 101 and 68 over my last 169 NFL picks. So it's been really good two seasons in a row, and we're off to a great start this season, which is exciting. I'm really jacked up about NFL, but this is a college football betting podcast, so I'll try to focus there. And before we get into a recap of the plays last week, please remember to rate, review, subscribe to this podcast, or give it a like on YouTube. Start in YouTube. You can get that on my homepage. Or just, go over to YouTube and type in Freddie Wills, and you should be able to find it very easily. But thanks for listening to this podcast, and we'll go over all the picks from last week. Last week and later in the week, we will have a free pick video along with my money report, which we did last Friday. We'll have that again. Last week we gave out Iowa State +7, an outright winner. So hopefully we continue with those, as our free picks have been, you want 60% winners. You're going to have some losing streaks for sure. We've been doing really well with our free picks, 73 and 53 over our last 126. So that's really, 49 and 35 over our last 84 college football. And those trends are up over at FreddieWills.com. Again, I release all my picks the minute the game starts. So you can track that on Twitter. You can track it on my website, FreddieWills.com/records. As soon as the game starts at 12:01 in my records table, my pick is there. So I do that for integrity issues because there's, obviously a lot of people don't trust handicappers. And honestly, I don't blame them because, I like to look at my competition and there are a lot of guys out there that are, very honest, loyal guys, but there are people out there that it seems a little weird, some of the stuff that they either post or their records that they post, or you just go to their website, you can't find their records. I always wanted it to be the opposite of that, and I want to be fully transparent. And I apologize if I talk about this on every podcast, but it's freaking important. With the click of a button, you can export all my records. Again, I don't see any handicappers that doing that. You can go back to 2009 when I started doing this. So sorry that I'm on a long-winded rant here to start the podcast, but I always report when I'm losing versus winning. Of course, it's like nicer to report when you win versus lose. But anyways, let's go over to the plays. Last Friday, I gave it a play we probably never should have, as we were on Louisiana Tech plus 24.5. We did buy at the right time as the line went back down to 24, 23.5 before kickoff, so I felt good about that. But turnovers were a big reason why Louisiana Tech did not cover this game against BYU. They were -2 in the game. And before the start of Saturday, we were -20 turnover margin in the past 2 weeks of our college football picks, and we hadn't had a single game where we were plus turnover margin. So thankfully that did change on Saturday late. Very thankful for that. I know that that's not always going to be the case, but considering where we are in college football season right now, and considering the bad luck we've had, I'm super excited about this season and the rest of the season. Let's talk more about this game. BYU was, plus 200 yards in this one. But only first down Louisiana Tech, 26-18. Yet they go on to win 45-14, covering their spread by 6.5 points. BYU now number 1 in success rate margin in the country. They rank first with 55% success rate on offense, and they're third on defense. But their games have been against, let's call it what it is. Troy and Louisiana Tech. I think the verdict is out on Louisiana Tech and Troy, but they also dominated a bad Navy team. So what do we know about BYU? I don't know, but they're going to start getting some crazy spreads. You have to pay a premium to back BYU, and we are seeing it this week as they're a 35-point favorite to Texas San Antonio at home. Possibly a little bit of a look-ahead spot if you want to really talk about it, because this is probably like the only game left on their schedule that could be a challenge, and that's Houston on the 16th, which should be a very competitive game. Houston still hasn't played yet this season. They're going to open up their season tomorrow night, Thursday. I'm excited to see Houston because I wanted to back them against Baylor earlier this year, and that game got canceled. So they've had 3 games canceled. They've been practicing, haven't had any breaks with practicing. They got to be itching to get on the field. So definitely leaning towards Houston this Thursday against Tulane. For Louisiana Tech, they come down out of elevation, and they're a 14.5-point favorite against UTEP. I'm not interested in backing this team as a favorite. I'll look to back Louisiana Tech as an underdog, possibly as early as next week against Marshall. On to Saturday, where we went 3-2. One of the big losses. We should have been 4-1. We had a loser on our teaser leg 1, which I always hate that, because then we go into the night game, and the second part of our teaser was we had Georgia in the Auburn game, and I was excited for that because I felt really good about getting Georgia basically at a pick 'em in that game after watching the previous week Auburn versus Kentucky. But the first leg here consisted of Kentucky, and it wasn't pretty again. We did win on Sunday in our NFL teaser, so we still have been profitable on our teasers. 102-72 over our last 174 sports teasers, plus 76.8% return on investment if you only played my teasers. And that dates back to 2012. I don't know how many other handicaps with a click of a button give you access to records like that. And if you want to go back to 2009, I have a formula, an algorithm on my homepage that puts together these trends, and trends are nice. Hot streaks are nice to show to you guys. You can, we're dating back to 2012. We're talking about 174 picks, so it is not a small sample size. But again, if you want to go, click of a button. If you know how to use Excel, you can put a filter in, filter teasers, and you can see all my teasers, even going back to the days where I did basketball, college basketball. I stopped doing those other sports. Not because I wasn't good at them. I had I thought that the market got a lot sharper, and I really just wanted to focus on football. I did have profitable seasons and award-winning seasons over on the Sports Capping Network for all sports: baseball, basketball, college basketball. So I just kind of stopped doing that. I really want to focus on football. Again, that's another differentiator between myself and some other handicappers out there who focus on all sports. Which obviously, as you know, all sports are going on right now, and I'm solely focused on football. So Kentucky, once again, for the second week in a row, should have covered, but they didn't. And watching that game was very frustrating. We only needed them to win the game in the teaser. A missed extra point in OT cost them the game. They were 15-1 their last 16 times they rushed for 195 yards or more. They rushed for 408 yards in this game, and for the second week in a row, they were plus in yardage but lost the game and did not cover the spread. They were plus 100 yards here, but they had a key turnover on the goal line after a player celebrated prematurely going into the end zone, threw up the peace sign. Ooh, look at me, I'm fucking fast. And then the guy comes behind and tackles him at around the 4-yard line. I really hate when players do that. It's just not a team move. Like, I expect more. And, I want to back Kentucky again this week because they're a small favorite. But I can't after back-to-back weeks. And, you guys want to go bet them because as soon as I come off them, I know they're going to cover this week. They fumbled on the goal line on a couple plays later. They did the same thing against Auburn before the half. So those are two plays that had a hugely negative impact on my bankroll and my client's bankroll. That's minus 6.6% right there. That's honestly the difference between us having a profitable college football season and a negative just because Kentucky fumbled on the goal line twice in back-to-back games. Because we were minus 6.6% on those two plays, and we should have been plus 6%. A differential of 12.6%. We'd be up over 20 units on the season in college and football combined. So right now, Kentucky's on my shit list because, and it's not even so much that they fumbled on the goal line. I get that can happen, and I'm not stupid. I watched the game. I saw what Ole Miss did on offense, and they were stopped on the goal line by Kentucky. So you want to say, oh, all right, but they lost. They kicked an extra point, missed an extra point in overtime. I mean, I just don't think I can play Kentucky for a while. And again, I think that they probably do win this week. They just don't have a pass rush. Their secondary isn't very good. And honestly, they don't deserve my attention this week. Ole Miss, a 24-point dog at home to Alabama. I know there's some crazy weather in that game. We'll talk about that later at the end of the podcast because Alabama has a major look ahead. Little teaser there. Alabama, we'll talk about some look aheads in some games this week. So we'll talk about that shortly. Lane Kiffin gets to face his old team this week at home. I'm pretty sure they should be able to put up some points, or maybe not, because that total has dropped 8 points. I'll tell you why later in this podcast. So the second leg of my teaser, talked about briefly, Georgia, and they flat out dominated Auburn in this one. I felt they should. Honestly, it was one of those situations. I should not have played Kentucky and just played Georgia and not given out a teaser. I like to wait in college football to give out teasers till like the 4th or 5th week because I just think there's less variance once we know a little bit more about the teams. But I kind of should have known better because that was week 2 for the SEC, while it was week 4 or week 5, whatever the hell you want to call it for college football. It was week 2 for the SEC, so we were going to see variance. I still felt like maybe this is just me being stubborn. I still felt like we were on the right side for things we mentioned earlier with Kentucky. But listen, Georgia dominated this game, and Bennett at quarterback. That made Stetson Bennett, I think is his name, made the start for Georgia, and they played a lot faster than they typically do, mainly because he knows the offense. So I expect Georgia to be able to put up some points as long as he's in there, because they've picked up the pace compared to previous seasons where they're more conservative. Georgia, in what many people are going to call a monster sandwich spot this week. I don't know what kind of sandwich you want to call it, but with a hot Tennessee team coming in, the line Plus 14 at open, down to 11.5 at Pinnacle, who takes a lot of money. Honestly, I'm not so sure this isn't to try to set some money up on the other side. Um, we'll get to Tennessee next, but yeah, a supposed Georgia look-ahead spot, and I'll talk more about that in my look-ahead section here. And we don't want to get through a couple more games that we bet on here. I had Missouri plus 13 against Tennessee. Missouri -1 turnover margin did not help. Our handicap was based off of Missouri's quarterback Sean Robinson playing, but he was, I guess, benched, and the replacement didn't look good. Tennessee played well, so I got to give them credit. Guarantano, the quarterback, was extremely impressive with some of his throws that weren't there the week before against South Carolina. He missing open guys on third down. I think they were 1 for 12 on third down against South Carolina, and I think they went over 50% in this game. And Guarantano was just throwing dimes out there. Now, whether that continues this week when he goes on to play Georgia, better defense, I don't think so, especially on road. I'm going to have to, in my handicap, look into his home and away splits because, he was not good at South Carolina, got to go back home, play Missouri, and looked great. And now he's going back on the road at Georgia, top 3 defense. So we'll have to see what happens there. Georgia, obviously has a couple of elite receivers, so you have to think that they can exploit Tennessee's secondary, which is the weakness of that defense so far, at least. And as I mentioned, I don't think Guarantano can play 2 clean games in a row. So leaning towards Georgia in that one, and obviously they have Alabama on deck. So is that a game that I'm going to stay off of because of that? I don't think so, but we'll definitely talk about that here shortly. Take a break here. Make sure you guys subscribe to my weekly premium newsletter. It over 11% profit over the last 3 years. I'm giving out in one email, 1 per week, no spam, 1 premium play that clients pay for. So you get that in addition to my free pick video on Fridays, or if you just subscribe on the website to get free pick alerts, you can get it by text message or email. So two picks for me each week without paying a dime just for listening to this podcast. So make sure you guys enjoy that. This past week, we gave out West Virginia plus 120 on the money line. Despite 4 turnovers, they were able to pull this one off in overtime. I'm sitting there early, and this is after being -20 turnover margin the past 2 weeks in college football after Friday night. And we just get West Virginia that plays a terrible game. Turns the ball over 4 times. Mind you, all 4 of those turnovers came in Baylor territory. So, that was terrible. But Baylor couldn't do anything with it. So we were lucky that West Virginia took a 7-point lead, and then Baylor came down and scored. But they lost in overtime. So we're now 2-1-1 this season on our premium pick newsletter. Neither team plays this week. West Virginia doesn't play, and neither does Baylor. So nothing really to look ahead to at this point. On to the night games where my turnover luck improved as Arkansas. Arkansas was a +3 turnover margin and +17 easy cover and outright upset of Mississippi State, who just beat down LSU. Mississippi State probably playing with too much confidence. And Arkansas, which has been a doormat the past 3 years in the SEC play, probably did not get much respect. I like this Arkansas coaching staff. They switched things up on Mike Leach's offense and played zone, which really impacted this game. Things don't get easier for Arkansas, though, as they do play in the SEC. They head on to the road to face Auburn as a 14-point dog. Auburn's got to be pretty pissed off, ready to maybe take it out on Arkansas. No lean near. I think that spread is pretty spot on. It's crazy, though, because it does suggest that Mississippi State would be -3 on a neutral against Auburn or -6 at home, which I still think Auburn's a better team than Mississippi State. I'm not going to buy into all the Mike Leach hype. Like, he's entertaining. He's a good follow on Twitter. I retweet some of his stuff sometimes. It's pretty funny. Iowa State, last play that we gave out to clients, they were even in turnover. So we were +3 on the night in turnover margin in the 2 games, and it gave us a winning Saturday. We mentioned in our last podcast YouTube video this was going to be a down year for Oklahoma with an inexperienced quarterback behind an offensive line that's not as good and a defense that is Well, let's be honest. They're not good. Every year, they're going to be better, and they were slightly better last year, but they were still a bad defense. It's really a shame. Um, Oklahoma now a 1.5 point favorite this week against Texas in the Red River rivalry. This is the smallest spread I can remember in maybe a decade. I don't see what either of these teams have to play for after Texas just got beat by TCU as they fumbled on the goal line. I mean, Oklahoma definitely with 2 losses out of the playoff picture. So you wonder if this team with a young quarterback just starts looking at next year. I mean, are the players as excited? Are you going to start seeing opt-outs? There's all these question marks going through my head here with Oklahoma. And again, I mentioned it on the podcast, and I mentioned this with Kansas State last year. After Oklahoma lost to Kansas State, they went 1-4 against the spread the rest of the way. And Kansas State, who beat Oklahoma, gained confidence, and they went 3-1 against the spread down the stretch. What happened this past week? Oklahoma didn't cover; they lost outright. Kansas State covered, won by double digits. So you want to keep playing that. I mean, you could. If you want, I mean, it's a small sample, but I think there's something to all of that I just said. And I typically do play Texas in this game, but with this smaller spread, this is the smallest spread we've seen in a while. I might be passing this year. I definitely need to dig because Tom Herman as an underdog has always done well, even though it doesn't feel like he's an underdog here. Some other games that I didn't give out that I think are worth mentioning: Virginia Tech versus Duke. Virginia Tech just squeaks out Duke. Tech squeaked by here, and it's worth noting that Virginia traveled without a defensive coordinator. I think they had 5 or 6 guys out from the secondary that didn't travel due to COVID, which allowed Duke to put up over 400 yards of offense. Duke only turned the ball over once. They were actually +2 in turnover margin. This was after 12 turnovers in their past 2 games combined. And they still lost this game, though. I recall Virginia Tech without starters due to COVID dominate NC State, a team that just shocked Pitt on the road as a 14-point dog. So I think this Virginia Tech team could be sneaky good this year. They didn't even start Herndon Hooker. So I think that we might be getting a little value here with Virginia Tech, who I think should be probably about a 3-point dog at North Carolina. They're a 5-point dog. I think that Virginia Tech didn't show all their cards this past week they were playing Duke, even though they were playing without starters. I think that, I think we got some line value here on Virginia Tech for the reasons I mentioned. And then Navy Air Force, I'm really kicking myself for not playing Air Force +7. All I heard all week was that Air Force had 40 players opt out, and they weren't allowed back. Meanwhile, I knew Air Force had 8 weeks to prepare for this game. They have, typically 125, 150 players typically in their program. So losing 40 players, yes, that's a lot. But, these players, I hate saying that they're replaceable. It's like a system that Air Force runs up there, all these service academies do, where they could just replace players. And who better to face in your first game with those opt-outs than Navy, a team you play every year, a team that runs a similar offensive style that you do. So, and Navy is going to be down this year. They have quarterback issues. Look, they'll be playing Temple this week at home as a 3.5-point dog. I don't really know what we know about Temple at this point because it's their first game, I believe. And so I just worth mentioning that, when a team hasn't played and they're playing a team that has played, it's not as big of an advantage. You could argue it's an advantage for the team not playing because they have film on the other team. And that was definitely the case here. And the Navy head coach I'm not even going to attempt to try to say his name because I'm terrible at that thing, pronouncing names. But, he even complained to the media and stop whining. I'm sorry. You're a head coach at an, service academy. Don't complain and make excuses. He was complaining that Air Force, didn't have a game. They had 8 weeks to prepare. Just be grateful and thankful that you're playing. That's my opinion on it, but whatever. I'm moving on here. Possible games this week with look-ahead spots. Louisville plays Notre Dame next week, but this Friday they don't have to. They have to go on the road to play a sneaky Georgia Tech team as a 6.5-point favorite, which is down to 4.5. Georgia Tech, a home dog on Friday night. I mentioned Georgia Tech's a sneaky team. But unfortunately, Louisville's a team that I also want to back, and Georgia Tech just makes too many mistakes. I've already been on them a couple times this year, and man, it stinks because it's a standalone game. If I was getting Georgia Tech at +7, I'd love Georgia Tech, but 4.5, I don't know if their defense can stop Louisville. Might be looking at the total in that game. LSU plays Florida next week, which has been a bit of a heated rivalry the past few years. LSU also with some distractions with a tropical storm coming in. They actually moved their game to Missouri, which is why you saw the spread 20.5 go down to 14.5. But now it looks like the game's been postponed. I'll have to read up on what happened there. Not really sure. Georgia at Alabama. That's obviously the big one. And I said I was going to touch on this. Normally, I would say this is a look-ahead spot for Georgia with Alabama. But this week against Tennessee, honestly, let's be honest, it's a bigger game. It's a division game. Tennessee's already 2-0 in the SEC East, while Georgia is playing their first game. Their first two games have been against the SEC West. So this game is more important to Georgia. They can't afford to lose the tiebreaker to Tennessee and start 0-1 in the division. The game against Alabama, it's not important. This game is more important than the Alabama game. In my opinion, for Georgia. And look, Georgia head coach Kirby Smart gets to go against Jeremy Pruitt from Tennessee, who was underneath Kirby when they were both at Alabama. Very interesting game here, and I think you're getting some value on Georgia, which doesn't usually happen with a top 3 team here this week. Definitely want to look at that weather. There's some weather issues going on this week in college football, so but I lean towards Georgia there. It's moved from 14.5 down to 12.5. I think you're getting value there with Georgia under 2 touchdowns. I think it should be more like 17.5. I will say this: the one thing that worries me, Georgia needs to be able to run the ball. The strength of Tennessee's defense is stopping the run. They definitely have talent up there. I just think Tennessee is gonna on the road against a big time. I don't think they're ready for the step-up game. I just don't. I don't think Guarantano is the guy long term. I think that he's going to make some mistakes on the road. Maybe I'm back next week talking about the opposite on my podcast. But for now, I still, and it's not an official play, but I definitely strongly lean Georgia. That wraps up this week's podcast. Again, as I said, I'll be back later in the week with my free pick video, and we will, talk about where the money is in the market at that time. So make sure you stay tuned. Please, as a reminder, please rate, review, subscribe to my podcast, to my YouTube videos. YouTube videos are new this year. You can easily find me on YouTube. You can it's linked on my homepage on freddywills.com. And again, subscribe to the Premium Pick newsletter. I got some great packages up on the website. And make sure you guys tune in later in the week for my free pick video. Thanks again.